You're watching Morning at NTV.
All right, welcome back to Morning at NTV. Many thanks for still joining us. Hashtag Morning at NTV. Let's engage. Before I wrap up, I'm sure you're asking, Mala, you're promoting this hashtag too much and you're not reading out our messages and conversations on social media. I'll do just that before we wrap up, okay? So we're coming from a cancer conversation and let's flip over to human rights. We can't run away from human rights conversations. So when we touch on human rights, you do know that we have the 71st International Human Rights Day coming up, and we're counting down. But what does this mean for the country, and what will be the key theme this year? And of course, they're saying that they're looking at young people who comprise, beg your pardon, of the biggest number in Uganda. They say over 70% of the population of over 40 million Ugandans, we have the young people, over 70%. So you have a voice and you need to understand that you indeed have a voice and do something about it. So this year's theme will be on youth standing up for human rights. But the big question is, how do you go about standing up for human rights? So to get us understand that conversation, I'm being joined in studio by Ms. Charity Ahisimbiwe. She is the head of communications advocacy at Foundation for Human Rights Initiative right here in the country. Many thanks and welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you.
All right. So we know that the young people are the majority. And right now that we are counting down to the 2021 general elections, even the president is appreciating that factor, that a majority of Ugandans are the young people, hence the focus on the ghetto youth. But human rights will become a big conversation, especially now that we're getting close to the polls. So what is human rights and what can the young people do to step up to that mandate, to fight and stand up for human rights?
Now, I will try to put in perspective the whole concept of the 71st Human Rights Day that is being celebrated today on 10th of December. It is correct, stand up for your rights. The young people are meant to take center stage of the rights. The Universal Declaration for Human Rights does stipulate human rights and states what a human right is. It is your born, inherited right. God gave it to you. Nobody can take it away from you. So you have a right to life, you have a right to enjoy yourself, you have a right to not having hate speech, you have a right to democracy, like you talked about the elections. Yes, I work for the Citizens Coalition, and if you see, I have Topoa here. Citizens Coalition was a project under FHRI for a very long time, but recently moved on to be an independent entity. So the foundation continued with the human rights arm, and the Citizens Coalition continued with the arm of electoral democracy. But we have the right to vote. It is also a human right. So the Uganda Human Rights Commission does have partners all over in civil society, in government institutions. The Office of the Human Rights Commission is also its partner. GTZ is its partner. And all human rights organizations, USAID, are their partners, because Article 51 and 52 do stipulate that the Uganda Human Rights Commission is supposed to keep track of human rights. So when this day is going to be celebrated, what the Uganda Human Rights Commission and its partners do is to look at government and track how have they upheld human rights as enshrined in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, because that declaration is wide. If we had to speak about each of the rights that are inside there, would slip here.
Yes, yes. Right. You know, you've talked about how Uganda has performed.
Yes.
And I'll ask you this question.
Yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10,
Yes.
where do you put us at? Especially now that we're in the space whereby the opposition facet is collecting signatures to present His Excellency, the President of Uganda, to the ICC on basic human rights violations. So where do you rate Uganda at? Where are we?
I think that there's been an improvement in the human rights situation in Uganda, in the sense that we have a law now that implicates directly policemen, for example, who beat or intimidate or torture Ugandans. So it is no longer the broad thing of they will be implicated as a force. because it wasn't clear for the judges. But now that Human Rights Act, which the president appended his signature to, it hasn't come into force because it hasn't been gazetted, but it will come into force eventually since he appended his signature. That Human Rights Act, what it has done for Uganda is to take it many miles apart in terms of human rights observancy. At least we have the legal framework. That's a good one. Two, we have the will that now even the head of the police, Martin Okotho Chola, says, look, if you commit these crimes, the law will come after you yourself. You're on your own course. So that gives a bit of confidence that as much as there is a lot of human rights abuses unabated, because the scale is still there, we still see these cases that are every day monitored and documented. Makerere University recently is a clear example.
Yes.
The students decided to stand up for their right to education.
What happened to them? We all saw.
We all saw.
Even to the journalists as well.
Exactly. And some being, like the journalists were tortured. And that's also a right. The right for the journalists to report. The right to freedom of expression. Okay, but it was infringed upon by the police, by the military. We saw all that happening, and we continue to see these cases. But the students wanted to defend that right to education, and we saw girls beaten up.
But Charity, like, that example is perfect. But post that, nothing has been done. We haven't seen people fronted or implicated for the violations they perpetrated during just that strike period at Makerere. So, rate us, 1 to 10, where are we?
You know, in a situation of where you're sitting in for the Uganda Human Rights Commission, rating the country becomes a bit very tricky. If I was only sitting in from Foundation for Human Rights as a civil society, it would have been much easier. But what I want to say is that at least for the case of Makerere, which I quote right now, they did document. The Human Rights Commission has documentation to that effect. Then a press statement was released and track record of what the military was doing, and there was demand from the Uganda Human Rights Commission for the military to withdraw from the university. We saw them withdrawing. Maybe they wouldn't have withdrawn if there wasn't pressure from the body that is enshrined with the duty in Article 51 and 2. Yeah.
They actually did withdraw, but not to 100%. All right, you did mention that it's okay. The government is doing quite a bit. We have the president who, well, is facing a lot of bashing with regards to human rights.
Yes.
But appended a signature on the Human Rights Act,
Yes.
which is awaiting gazettement for it to be implemented or enacted, or for us to see some fruits out of it.
Yes.
So how long will it take for this act to be gazetted?
Now
What is holding it back?
Correct. That's a problem of Parliament, because Parliament was supposed to have ensured that this act by now has come into enforcement, but they have not gazetted it. And we've tasked Parliament. The Uganda Human Rights Commission, together with its partners, have been demanding, why haven't you enacted the Human Rights Act? Because they appended a signature in June, and we are now in December. And they say, you know, the processes, the Prime Minister has to come to the floor, the Prime Minister. We said, no, this is not true. Actually, pressure is still ongoing to get that law gazetted and coming into full force.
Do you think the delay is deliberate, especially with the political scene that we're in right now?
I'm tempted to think as a human rights activist that it is a delay. But seeing that the president himself appended, you see, when he appends, it's different. Parliament has no choice at that point. It would have been a delay like with the ACDEG, the African Charter for Democracy and Governance, where he has not appended his signature, where he has not ratified it. That one, we could say there is a delay. But in this case, he has appended his signature. So maybe I would be too harsh to say
a delay on the part of Parliament? Do you think this
I
is
think that the Parliament has failed to understand its role in as far as this act in enforcing human rights observance in Uganda is concerned. And I think that that's where the problem starts. We have a lot of issues that are within Parliament and in the confines of Parliament, and Parliament doesn't take them seriously. And that is why I said that one of the things that we're looking at this time in this Human Rights Day is child marriages.
Right.
And the main celebrations are taking place in Omoro. Now, child marriages have continued to be a big problem in Koboko, in Zombo, in Omoro is where the speaker of the deputy speaker, Olanya, comes from. So why hasn't he made it a big advocacy issue that children are being married off?
So what you're saying is that Parliament fails to understand some of these issues,
yes,
and the magnitude thereof. Yes. Because when you're looking at this, and I think I can just link it to the electoral reforms,
yes,
that CSOs have
yes, come
up to say that, why are we taking so long to finish this document? Because it's like we're closing this.
Yes.
And well, they're bashing the EC, saying that you're the guys who are causing this delay. And yet these are documents or provisions that we need to have in place before we get to the 2021 general elections. So my question to you would be, we're banking on the youth. We're trying to make sure that they understand their role in this.
Yes.
But the big question is, whenever the youth try to stand up for what is rightfully theirs, whenever they stand up to, challenge status quo, what happens?
They're beaten.
Tear gas, beaten, rubber bullets. So how can we empower the youth? And where we're living in a space whereby the young people are saying the only one who has the voice is the only one who has the money.
There's actually a need for a proactive and deliberate policy that focuses on issues of agriculture and unemployment, because that's where they are. Most of the youth are unemployed. Most of the youth need to be in agriculture sector. So there needs to be a proactive, deliberate government policy that promotes the areas where the youth are participating, also helping them take center stage at every level of leadership. Actually, what we're seeing right now with them being blocked, SEDU is concerned as a body that promotes elections in Uganda that, look, young people at this stage, 70%, like you put it, correct, yes, according to you, boss, 72%, 70 there, they should be at the center of governance of their issues. But what do we see? We see an overwhelming force against them, and they wonder, so they respond through violence. They respond by fighting back because they are defending what is rightfully theirs according to the Constitution. I think that at that point, government should be seen to support them more. Government should be seen to be putting in place programs that support them more. We've seen the skilling of young girls by the president.
Yes.
That is a good initiative, but we need many more skills like those. Maybe he cannot take up all the girls to skill them. Maybe he cannot take up all the boys and girls, but the education system is one thing that we've been talking about in Uganda. And people want to start with a certain minimum level of education. But remember, there is also the poor child. The education system has improved, but for the rich people, for people who can gain access to finances.
Right.
But the poor people are still left out. And that was the whole fracas at Makerere. The health sector, the same thing. People should have a right to health. But what do we see with our health centers? People cannot access health. So I think that there should be a deliberate government policy that says maybe every year we shall have 100 health centers that are upgraded to a hospital status, based on the population quotas of every area within Uganda, but mainly focusing on young people.
Let me ask you, and for me is, if you're pro this or what it will take for us to get to that ideal. Whenever we're having conversations here in the show and we sample, of course, on the touch screen, right, there are views coming from the viewers, a majority come out to say that we want a youthful leadership.
I know.
When you look at the leadership of the country, it's all the old folks. Well, we appreciate them. We're where we are as a country because of their wisdom and their guidance and leadership. But what will it take for us to have that flip of generations, whereby the young people are also entrusted with power, and we get them and we get government seen to promote them to get to those, hierarchies up there, so to speak. Because, a majority are saying that we are the majority, we're 70%, but the ideals of this old people are passed with time, and we want people who understand us. So what will it take for us to get to that ideal that a majority of Ugandans are hoping and praying for? And that's why we know come 2021 who a majority is saying they want. What is it for you?
The ideal. What will it take for the young people to take center stage? I think that also the old people need to step back and accept that times change.
Okay.
Because even the digital era came.
Yes.
We never used to have mobile phones. Remember, there is a time where there were no mobile phones. And communication was very difficult. I'm told that in the earlier years than even the one where we didn't have mobile phones, there were those circular phones.
Yes. And call booths.
So that changed. And then we had the phone, and then we had... So we've seen things that change. So change is inevitable. And I think that our leaders and the older people, and by the way, this is across the spectrum, even in parliament,
Yes.
without just necessarily talking about the president, but also in parliament. The older people in parliament need to let the young people come on board with the ideals that reflect the ones of the other young people.
What will it take for them to have that change of mindset, especially for us, because we know that, fine, we have young people who have the potential to lead us, but mentorship is key as we transition. So what will it take for those old fellows, with all due respect, them that have benefited us for a very long time, to step aside but also usher in these young people through mentorship? Effective mentorship.
I think one of the things is that we should go back to the Constitution and reinstate the Constitution back to its place where it was. So the term limits, age limits, all those things that we went cutting out should be reinstated in that Constitution, because there is posterity. There must be continuity. When you talk of governance, when you talk of issues of leadership, you must have legal framework. That's why I even started by saying the Universal Declaration. That declaration also enshrines democracy, good governance, human rights. All these issues are enshrined. So we should not be seen to be changing this constitution, but rather we should be seen to be strengthening that institution. And the institutions that serve the young people, the Electoral Commission, the judges, the judiciary, we should see these people judging fairly, not judging in favor of.
Right,
yes,
right. Okay.
Because that's what we have seen.
All right. Lastly, my question to you, of course, as we get into the details of this year's celebrations and where they're going to be at in Uganda, still on CSOs and, of course, the opposition facets, they're saying that, well, the voter registration process is actually... we're having 8 days or so to go, is on. And they're saying that by the time we get to the electioneering year,
yes,
we're going to be having 1.3 million young people becoming adults.
Correct.
Eligible for voting.
Yes.
Who will be left out because the voter registration process is almost closing.
Correct.
So do you think the EC is going to rethink this? Because it's also infringing on the rights of these young people, the 1.3 who will be 18 by 2021.
And thank you very much for this question, because Article 59 does say you have a right to vote. And that is why I started by saying that CEDU is one of the partners of Uganda Human Rights Commission, and that's a very, very huge question. If the process ends on 11th December, like you have said, a big number of those young people will be closed out, and yet the election happens in 2021.
Right.
Now, I cannot speak for Electoral Commission, but we've been engaging and asking what would happen. And they said they would think about how to be very inclusive to allow for everybody to be part of the process. But we also understand that an election must follow a track and a process.
Okay.
But I hope, and really hope beyond hope, that the young people who turn 18 are given a chance to vote, because it is their right.
Okay. Final question. Of course, we have the 71st International Human Rights Day.
Yeah.
Uganda will not be left behind. We'll also be having our celebrations right here. So give us the details. Of course, the 10th is the date, the 10th of December.
Correct.
Where is this going to be, and how can people plug in?
Okay, so we have a number of activities that we have planned. 10th, we are in Omoro. I told you, because of child marriages, the high incidences. What we need to do is to raise awareness, because we use this day to raise awareness and also to create advocacy over the issues that have remained recurring. So you will see us on press conferences. The whole of today we're going to be in different spaces doing press conferences, at golf course, after that, we are going to do tree planting.
Okay.
Because we must also, we said it's young people, it's continuity, it is future. We're going to do zebra cross painting.
Okay.
And we are also going to schools to encourage the young people there. So these are key activities that are happening from today, the 3rd, through to the 10th.
Okay.
So we have a dialogue, a youth dialogue on 4th. It's at golf course. It is an invite only. But if you're a young person and you feel motivated, just come.
Okay.
We will not throw you out.
Just come.
Yes,
We will not throw you out.
Just come.
Okay. Thank you so much, Charity Ahimbisibwe,
Yes.
the head of communications and advocacy from the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative right here in the country. Let's get into the birthdays and keep those conversations going on #morning@NTV.